My name is Allison Cleary. I'm with Vermont StoryLab, and this is the Building Narrative Workshop. We're going to be talking about telling your community story. One of the things I worry about with this room is that it's so vast, people will spread into corners. And for storytelling, you need to be a little bit more intimate. So we'll be doing some breakout sessions, and when we do that, if you could gather closer to people rather than farther away, that'll be great. I just got a list of many of you who at least signed up for this workshop, and there's a tremendous amount of collective wisdom in the room, so we're going to tap into that as we work on talking about storytelling and what it means toward accomplishing your goals. You've all got something you're hoping to do with stories, and we're going to try and figure out how to focus it, craft the story, and then get it to your right audience. So welcome. If you know about Vermont StoryLab, or don't, we are a group of nonprofits and individuals who really want to help nonprofits and government organizations to craft stories so that they can get more outreach, further their advocacy, build awareness, reach funders. So, the day is going to be dedicated to, well, the hour is what is a story, why tell stories, and how do you tell stories. So you're all familiar with stories, and we've got one of the most popular stories right now, right there at the center. What is a story? There are a lot of different types of stories, but for the purposes of your purposes and your missions, we're going to talk about the dramatic arc story. So it usually starts with a character, goes into a conflict, climax, some kind of tension, and then there's a resolution at the end. And this is what you're going to be keeping in mind. So as we're talking, start thinking about the stories that you can build around what you want to accomplish. Who are your characters? What's the tension? What's the conflict? What's the struggle? And how are you having an impact on your community with a resolution? So that's you, Superman, and you can take him and put him into Superwoman or Superdog or whatever you want to do. But so you've got your character, you've got a goal, some kind of a goal, a roadblock, a struggle. You come in, you make the difference, you're having an impact, you're reaching your community, and you've got a resolution at the end. Everybody likes a good story. But why tell stories? So more and more you'll see large media groups, businesses, Nike, Reebok, Coca-Cola, etc. The way they're reaching you now is through storytelling. They make us feel something, they make us connect, they're going to inspire you. Stories help you remember. So research has been done to show that if you're hearing a story versus just hearing a collection of facts and statistics, the brain provides more space to accommodate the story than it does the facts and statistics. So you're likely to remember it a little bit longer. And I'm thinking about this morning's, the 5 leaders who were up here and they shared with us. Lucy Rogers from Waterville, she told us a story, I don't know if anybody remembers, her friend from China. That's the one that stuck with me. She's talking about her friend going back, 200 friends there, or there were 200 people in his village, but all the youth were gone. And it was the story of a community that was falling apart. So I'm thinking about her friend. I have him in my mind. I can see him. I can hear him talking with her. I can feel his pain. And Lucy's trying to prevent that from happening in Waterville, right? So she's coming in. She's Superwoman. She's coming in, and she's providing some kind of resolution. They connect us, they inspire us. When I hear a good story, it familiarizes me. I don't know her friend from China, but I know him now. I know a little bit about him, and I'm a little bit invested in his future and the future of his community. But that's because she introduced me to him. She built this character in a very short period of time. There's also been a lot of research that's been done recently about how if you're hearing a story, a personalized story, that your oxytocin levels go up. That's a neurochemical in the brain that helps us build more empathy and generosity. So if you're building, if the people you're talking with, your audience, has a lot of oxytocin building up, they're just going to open their wallet, right? The generosity is going to come forward. So there's a lot of research around the power of narrative and storytelling. It also can change attitudes, behavior, policies, entire ways of thinking. You may not change their political party if that's what you're after, but you might make them more open-minded to part of your platform. Oxytocin equals empathy, and you're looking for empathy because empathy equals someone aligning themselves with your mission, with your vision. So, well, before we do this, let's get back there. Think about a character in your town, okay? Someone who helps to tell your story. And we're going to share that with each other, but first thing, find somebody in the room you do not know, okay? Or you don't know well, and tell them who you are, what you do, and why it matters. Okay, this is big advertising language. Who are you? What do you do? Why does it matter? And then we're going to then share one character who's crossed your path. And maybe it's a colleague, maybe it's you can create yourself as a character. You've already created yourself, but you can use yourself as a character. Okay, so who are you? What do you do? Why does it matter? And share the story of one character. Just tell us about one character. So go ahead and find somebody in the room. We're going to be moving a little bit here. Vermont StoryLab workshops are always about movement. Okay. How are you doing? So you have, in this room, we have a tremendous number of characters just sitting here in the room, right? But then you've all tapped into characters within your community as well. And one of the things that at Vermont StoryLab that we often find working with nonprofits, government organizations, higher ed, churches, is that their message is misunderstood or not understood at all. So you want a little bit of clarity there. But the character is the one who can help you share that message. All right, so you're going to be working with these characters and your stories as we go along. This was a story that was out of LA. It was in the LA Times. And I know Los Angeles is not a rural community in Vermont, but the story's all about a very small neighborhood in LA. And I don't know how much you can see or not, but I'm just going to read you the first few lines. This is from 2008. Vivian Bowers works in a neighborhood that has gone undercover. Are there still businesses over there? People ask when she mentions her dry cleaning shop on South Central Avenue near East Adams Boulevard. 5 years ago, the city expunged the name South Central from its maps and replaced it with South Los Angeles to erase the stigma of riots and blight. Okay, so here's a community who dealt with some real strife. Really bad publicity, right? That's what the news was about South Central. It had nothing to do with what the community is, though. So when I read this article, it's Vivian that I connected with. It wasn't South Central. It was Vivian as a member, as a character within the South Central neighborhood, right? So I wanted to know more about her. And the writer, the journalist, failed to go back and really tap into her. They were talking about the policy, the decision that had been made, the mapping, etc. So I did a little bit more research. There was another man who's mentioned in the same article. Wonderful quote. You're going to be wanting to use quotes in your stories, right? Don't nobody want to come this side of town no more, said Lloyd Robertson, 71. Details, right? He's 71 years old. Who has lived at East 27th Street and Naomi Avenue since 1937. It's just like nothing over here. Okay, so he embodies what happened to that neighborhood. So I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by Vivian, I'm intrigued by Lloyd. And I want to know what happens to them. It's less about the neighborhood, it's more about the people, the characters. So I looked a little further. 3 years later, 2011, Vivian Bowers, award-winning Central Avenue businesswoman. Okay, she's lifting her neighborhood back. That was on Southern Public Radio. And this is her story. This is part of the oral storytelling from that particular radio story. I was a single mother. It was '94, just 2 years after the riots. The neighborhood was having a rough time. My sons who had worked at the store asked me not to take over the business, saying it was dangerous and we'd starve. Okay, 3 characters within one small paragraph, and it's her voice. So it goes on, it talks about how she's part of the health of the neighborhood as it's building itself back up again. I looked a little farther. So I'm thinking, what is it about that story that works? Intrigue, connection. So you're looking for people within your community who represent your mission, who represent the lifting, right? The resolution of the problem. So how do you find those people? Part of it is finding the characters. Town representatives. You can ask them, who are you thinking about? Who's come to you recently? Who's struggling? Who can't you stop thinking about right now? Those folks know the characters in the town a little bit more than I do from my one individual street in Hinesburg. Citizens. A lot of citizens who have little institutional memory of the community. So I'm thinking about the folks who live across the street from me, who live in one of the oldest homes in Hinesburg and who have tried to preserve it, and some of the struggle they've seen, and the change from 1960s when she was one of the first people in the neighborhood to wear Birkenstocks, to what she's doing now, working with her grandchildren. Donors. Who gives money? Who's giving money to your group? Why are they giving money? What is it about their connection to you that makes a difference? They've got a story. It's not just because you asked for money. You helped them invest in you, but there's a reason they're connecting with you. Volunteers. I think that was one of the identified things that all of you are looking for. You need more volunteers, right? But those who are with you, why do they do it? What are they getting back? They have stories to tell. And businesses. Who here inspires you? If there are businesses in your community, there's a reason they settled in Hinesburg, Vermont, or in Waterville, right? There's something about what they're doing that taps into the community. So you're looking for the Vivian Bowers of your community. I kept looking at this story, and in 2014, 3 years after the last article, the Los Angeles Times did another story, and this time they sent a reporter out to find out what's going on in the South Central neighborhood, right? And this time, so he's talking with all types of folks, and one of them was Lloyd Robinson again, and Lloyd talks about the glory days and how things are coming back a little bit. But there was also this lovely anecdote of Lloyd talking to a young man named Omar El Gabri, whose family owned a chicken market that used to be the Basket Room restaurant. They say there used to be lines here 3 blocks long. Now, El Gabri has a dream. He wants to open his own chicken restaurant at the site of the old Basket Room. I want to bring it back to what it used to be. Okay, it took 2008 to 2014, but look at what happened. It's the full story. But it took me a while to put those pieces together, right? So the mantra for your story should be, make people care. I care about Vivian. I care about Lucy's friend in China. I care about Lloyd, and I care about this young man now. Connect me. Help me know them. You're taking me by the hand, and you're kind of introducing me to a variety of people. Oh, I just came across this from the Stowe.com. In the face of a devastating fire, the Stowe Theater Guild is remaking itself. And I thought, well, there's a story there. And I couldn't actually find a written story beyond a few sentences. But who would your characters be? What do you think? You've got a theater guild that just had a big fire, lost all their costumes, a lot of the props, etc. Who would some of the characters be that you could tap into? Just shout it out. A director, great. Who else?
Audience.
Audience, for sure, right? Actors, yeah, I mean, look at those characters. And they're taking on other people's personas as well. Costume maker, the person who's behind the costumes. Maybe somebody who knows about the history of the stage and what it means to have been involved for a long time. There are so many different stories within that one little bit of strife. So why tell stories? You can raise money, right? Get those oxytocin levels up in the folks you're talking with. You're talking about stories that reach back to your core mission and they have an impact. You want to raise awareness, you want to inform and educate people about whatever it is that your focus is. You want to change behavior, oftentimes. You want to get people thinking a little bit differently, right? I mean, you have so many visionary missions in this room. It's so impressive to talk with you all. But how do you get the stories out so that other people invest in them? Who's your audience? So, audiences can be a fickle bunch, but you need to think about them very specifically. What do they care about? So in the magazine world, my background's in magazine journalism, when we're writing a story, we think very specifically about who our audience is. So this is a profile of a reader for a magazine that you're probably aware of. Jerry is 45, he's driven, he's ambitious, he works hard and he plays hard. He is a weekend warrior, a risk taker, he seeks adventure and he likes to look good. Jerry believes life should be fun. Any guesses as to the magazine?
Men's Health.
Men's Health, wow. Men's Health, well done. So look at how quickly you figured that out, right? All right. Okay. Now we've got another magazine. It's going to be a different audience. And when you're telling your story, you want to think specifically about your audience. This is Janelle. She's 35, she's a working mom. She finds herself always on the go, college educated, financially comfortable, cares about her community. She likes order in her life, but she is often overwhelmed by the demands of work, family, and home. Life is good. I wish I could slow down and enjoy it. What's the magazine?
Family Circle. Yeah.
Okay, could be any of those things, but we're going to tap into her sense of chaos. Real simple. It's all about making your life more simple because you're overwhelmed. Okay? Actually, it has some very interesting articles about communities in here as well. Okay, so who is your audience? Start thinking really specifically. You're not just thinking about people who live in Hinesburg, like I might be, but who is it? Does Janelle live in Hinesburg? Does Jerry? Psychographics and the demographics. Is it the busy select board? Okay. They might be a fourth generation farmer, they might be totally new to town, well, relatively new to town. They work full time, they might be retired, they might stay at home. You know they're tired, it's the end of the day, they're dedicating their time to these meetings weekly. I mean, these folks are local heroes, if you ask me. And they're dealing with people who often are upset about something or really passionate about something. So who on your select board can you build into a profile like Janelle or Jerry? Right? You need to think really specifically about them. Is it a donor, a foundation? Buffett, Gates, Oprah? Somebody probably a little closer to home, maybe the Avashan hardware store owner in your town. But these folks, they want to give their money, but you need to connect with them, and your story is going to make that happen, right? They want to do good for their community. They care about their community. The skeptical public. You've been to those meetings, right, where everybody's arms are crossed? It's much worse if it's January, but you've got all these various people. So in Hinesburg, the median age is 35. This actually surprised me. I learned this recently. The median income, $50,000. That also surprised me. We've got all spectrum of politics, hunters and vegans, farmers, artists, doctors. People don't want change, or they're desperate for change. So they're all over the map. But you need to speak to one of them. The same person who wants change isn't resisting change. So pick one of them, build that character in your mind, get familiar with him, her, or they, and then speak to them with your story, okay? They love their town. Every one of these audience members have loved their town. And I like to think of your audience as a really hopeful community. Someone who wants the town to thrive, the business, the people in it to thrive. And they're willing to change, but they might be a little scared of change. Okay, so who is your audience? You've got a character. You know your story, why you matter. Who is your audience? Why don't you talk to each other again about that audience? Think really specifically, right? Demographics, psychographics. How old are they? How much money do they make? How much education do they have? What keeps them up at night? What makes them happy? Who do they connect with? What do they eat? Talk to each other. Another couple minutes. You have an idea of the audience that you're speaking with? You might be writing for them, you might be talking with them, but you need to be thinking about them. Okay? There's one more member of the audience I was thinking about when I was thinking about small communities in rural Vermont. It's the folks outside of town who might want to move here, right? That's what Lucy was talking about with Waterville. That's what all of you are thinking about. You need them. You need them to really invest in your mission, your focus. So I'm going to tell you a Hinesburg story. So about 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe it's just a week ago, we kept seeing on the front porch for my husband and I this pop-up park notion. And there was a space in the middle of town, a green space in the middle of town, that belongs to the town. I didn't know it belonged to the town. And I kept saying, pop-up park, what does this mean? And people were starting to buzz about it. They were talking about it. So it was Maggie Gordon, who happens to be in the room, our planning commissioner chair, and Alex Weingarten, who is our town planner, who had gotten the idea of creating a public space, using a public space for the community. So that's the space back there. What do you see in it? Do you see people? What do you see? Okay, there's a tree, there's grass, there's some houses in the distance. Okay. A big, okay, you see work. Right. But the pop-up park happened. My husband and I biked down. And there's Maggie up there in the left-hand corner, and she was in front of, I forget exactly what she called it. Maggie, what was it called? The
Community feedback station.
Community feedback station. So posters with what you want to see in this park if it were to turn into a park. In the corner down here, people scooping ice cream. A local church had put actual cutlery down instead of plastic spoons, which was fabulous. I'm sitting there eating my ice cream thinking, I love this. And then here are 3 little girls that I'd never met before, eating their ice cream also, and they are the children of a woman who has a business in town, the local nail salon. So all these people I hadn't seen for a long time or new to me. So we've got a lot of characters up here. And it depends on what you want to do with this story. Do you want to turn it into a park? Do you want to just get the town aware of the space? Do you want to just get the community building community again? Since my children have left the home, they're 24 and 27 now, I find I don't have as many collective places to meet up with people. The grocery store, but certainly not the school, and I don't belong to one of the churches in my community. And I'm thinking, this could be kind of nice. So we could interview the little girls, the sisters, we could interview Maggie, you could interview somebody who's participating in the park. Well, what is it you want to get across? You've got to think about what your mission, what your purpose is, right? Why do you choose this character? What purpose do you have? And there was one other character that I thought could really carry this story. It's that lone tree. So there was an arborist there. Her name is Marie Ambusk, and she runs triage, takes care of trees. She was giving a pruning demonstration, which was fabulous. And she told me this tree is about 200 years old. It's one of the oldest trees in the town of Hinesburg. And of course, it's a green ash. So what do you know about green ashes? Yeah, we're all waiting, right, for the emerald ash borer to come. So that tree is a character in a story. And depending upon your purpose, do you want the tree there just to provide shade? Do you want to save the tree? Do you want to get people outside and you want to use the tree, the character, as part of that story? What is it you want to do? It turns out This is one of 2 trees in the town of Hinesburg that the town has decided to commit funding to so that it doesn't die from the borer, right? So they're going to be putting about $1,000 a year into treating it every year. So this is a hero story, right? The town came in, the town is saving the tree, the town became the superhero. That made me even prouder to be part of Hinesburg. And thinking about the news in the last month, what do you know about Hinesburg? What's been happening there? There was a murder. Okay, you probably did hear about it. But that's about the worst poor public relations that you can get. Somebody was murdered in your town and they can't figure it out. The cops haven't figured it out yet. None of the detectives have. This tree, that gives me hope. I know I feel safe in Hinesburg, but the people outside of Hinesburg are thinking about the murder maybe. So this whole pop-up park just rejuvenated us, and all these positive stories came out of it. And it was about, I hear this over and over from people who say, how can you teach journalism? I teach at St. Michael's. How can you teach journalism? It's so negative, there's so much fake media. Well, actually, I think there are a tremendous amount of positive stories, and we just need to focus again on them. We have to stop with the fear. We got to focus on the positive and what's coming together. But use your characters and talk directly to your audience about that. Oh, one of the other characters in that park, it's behind one of the oldest buildings in the town. So the town went from being a butcher shop, a meat market, to being a tenant farmer house, to being a police station. And then some of the folks in town worked hard to preserve it, and it's now a batch of businesses, really nicely renovated. And guess what? Front Porch Forum again. The day after the pop-up park happened, this young mother said she just wrote this glowing review of how much she loved it. She moved from South Burlington, where she wasn't feeling community, and she, not to say anything bad about South Burlington, but she was looking for exactly what you all represent. Rural communities with people who want to be there because the environment will support who they are. I'm so happy we moved here. We all walked home with our hearts full of Hinesburg happiness. Yeah, it's corny, but man, is she a great character, right? And she was lovely. I actually met her when I was there. She was open to meeting people. So your character, the volunteer, the town official, citizen, family, the tree, maybe it was the building. You can create a building character as well. Let me imagine who lived in that building, who's working there now. Maybe it's a street corner. Maybe it's a corner where things happen. There's a very famous, it's St. Louis, I think, story where it was a clock that stood on a street corner that had been there for a long time. And people met up there, and the journalists spent 3 days there and just chronicled all the stories and all the connections that happened. Donor, benefactor, who's your character? Okay, you got your audience, right? You've got your character, or maybe you're thinking differently now about your character. What's your conflict? What's the struggle? For that tree, it's thinking about those bugs coming its way, right? But the town comes in. What is it that you provide? So what I'd like you to do now is to group with 4 people, hopefully at least a few of them you don't know well. And I want you to share your story, right? The story you're thinking you might be able to develop and work up. We're going to be talking about how you apply those stories a little bit later. But for right now, you're going to have 2 minutes per story and 1 minute for people to react to your story. Ask questions. Get that story more focused, more personalized, more in sync with your audience, okay? So feel free to move the chairs around. We just have to put them back in these straight rows when we're done. And I've got a bell up here. So we're going to start, I'll give you 20 seconds to find your people, find your community, and then start talking character, tension, and resolution. Okay, why don't we debrief a little bit around these? There's a lot of storytelling happening in this room. How many of you feel like you really found a character? Yep, okay, you identified a character, good. And sometimes it takes time, right? Don't beat yourself up. There's stories everywhere, but you really need to focus in on that character. How many of you felt comfortable with your audience? Sometimes, okay, good. And I heard a couple of people talking about how, wait a minute, this audience member is polar opposite to that audience member. Just focus in on one of them, right? Anybody want to share anything from your group? A story that came up that was particularly compelling? It's an intimidating group. Oh yeah, how can storytellers not tell stories? Anybody? Oh, great. Okay. If you just speak to the... Okay, just speak to the top of the microphone, kind of close.
I'm the director of a designated downtown, a small one in southern Vermont, and our town is very vital, and it's because a lot of younger people have moved to our community and have bought property and live in our downtown and are really, things are really hopping and they're bringing their friends and connections to our town. But at the same time, our community that was a paper mill town, and we have a lot of retired people, blue-collar retired workers, and somehow, in some ways, that population that's really been huge for the vitality of the town is a little bit suspect. I mean, they're from somewhere else, they didn't grow up here, what do they know? They want to change all these things and do these different... And so it's a matter of honoring the tradition and the heritage of the people who live there, and yet embracing the new vitality and getting those two groups of people to really get on the same page, and it's starting to happen.
Who's your character that you chose for your story?
I don't know. The character I think of is this young population. And there are a couple of people in that population who have really, gone a long way and tried to really engage and be part of the community.
Right, so taking one of them and their love of the community, that's what will connect with that other group, right? Who also loves the community. Good.
But just on that same note,
Go ahead.
So one of the other things that I thought was interesting about the story was, so there are people who are the new people in town, and then there are people who are the old people in town who kind of have a lot of knowledge of the town. And she mentioned a lot of the old merchants too, who, they know the way that things are done, and, these new people bring in a new way to do it. Could you technically have two protagonists in that story? They're both helping each other out?
Absolutely.
To maybe, and the town to forge a new way forward that is, that takes into account both the needs and the desires and the wants of both populations.
Right, so I might identify with one character, but not the other. But by the time the resolution comes, I like this one as well. Yeah, go ahead.
And I nominated a different character, which was pick a building with an interesting change of hands, and then profile it from people's memories and first-person accounts.
Good, so memories as well as what's happening in that building today?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
Old memories, new photos, side by side with old photos of
Right.
what the facade looked like, so on.
Good. What's the town?
Bellows Falls.
Okay, we're all going to move there, right? Somebody else. Yep.
That's the story. Sparkle Barn in Wallingford, Vermont, and one of our goals is to create community through fun art experiences and create memories. And so when we first started, I was new to town and hoping things would work out. We had artist Peter Huntington had a band, and so we had him play. And one of my neighbors, Walt, who was the character of the story, he came, introduced himself as Walt, and went upstairs. 15 minutes later, he came back down, and I was like, oh my God, he hates it. And I said, are you leaving? He said, no. I've lived in Wallingford for 40 years, and this is the first thing that's ever happened, and I'm getting my iPod so I can show my son. So I was like, yes.
Yeah, beautiful.
You're the protagonist.
Someone else? I guess, yeah. Trish?
I lost my only child by miscarriage right before I turned 40. My husband's 15 years my senior came with a family he didn't want another. So I decided to see the eyes of my child and the eyes of every child. And so I started a heart-based after-school program in Greensboro called Wonder and Wisdom. One of the things I thought I wanted to do was pass on what I knew, which the children made very clear was nothing. So they taught me what they needed, and I feel so fortunate to fully understand now what Fred Buckner said, when find the grace. Grace is where your passion meets the world, the needs of the world. They showed me the needs of the world. I found my passion. I'm now working through Whole Heart with people of all ages, and have asked to be a storyteller for the Obama Foundation.
Wow, all right. Trish, I heard about 10 stories in that story, so yeah, it's rich, right? One more? All right. Well, you've got a great start. Now, so how do you tell your story now? One of the things as a journalist, my background's in magazine, I think I mentioned that. What we do when we're thinking about, is this newsworthy? Is our audience going to be interested in this? We test it against 5 different elements of newsworthiness. Is it timely? That pop-up park just happened, right? It's very timely. I'm not going to be writing about that in January. I'm not going to be telling the story, or I might be tapping back into it, but it'll have a different impact at that time. So I was thinking about COTS, when they do their COTS walk. It's very timely right during that week. The penguin plunge is timely in February, but you don't talk about them outside of those months, so think about that. Impact. What's the impact of the pop-up park? I was talking with Maggie a little earlier, and she said, we don't know where this will go, but we wanted to find out from their community what they want. But now they've got some ideas to work with and some real feedback. So the impact, and to me, the impact was meeting all these people I'd never known before in Hinesburg, and meeting that tree. I love that tree. Proximity. Penguin plunge in Burlington is not going to be news as much in Hinesburg, except there's a teacher in Hinesburg who brings a group of students there. So that works for me. Proximity, that green park is right in the middle of Hinesburg. Let's see here. Conflict. Do you remember there's a story about the poplar trees in Shelburne Farms that came down? Everybody felt they knew those trees. It was very controversial. They knew they had to take them down. Conflict was the reason that story became big, and they put it into their blog. And then everybody understood why Shelburne Farms had made that decision. But if you read it in the Burlington Free Press, you might have become a little bit outraged that those trees were gone. Novelty. Sometimes there's just something quirky about the story, and it tickles the funny bone of your audience, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Novelty, we always say classically, it's not that the dog bit the man, it's when the man bites the dog. That's your story, right? It's a little different spin. And prominence. If that park becomes a park, the pop-up park idea becomes a park, and Bernie or Oprah comes and cuts the ribbon around the tree, that's a story, right? So you've got some prominence, somebody famous who's involved in your story. You've got an event that you've planned, you bring somebody famous in, the community members are interested in, the story builds from there. Okay, this is an email that I got, for some reason I'm on the Queen's Library email listserv from New York. And this was a project that they had been building for months. It was a community quilt from refugee families. Each of them had made a different square in the quilt. And then you can see the audio that's connected to the squares. And they told the story of their family coming from refugee situations. So I looked at this, I thought, what a neat project. But look at how this press release reads. Queen's Memory Summer Project, Common Thread, Making a Community Story Quilt. Oh, that's a done in itself. I'm turning the page or clicking on to my next one. Was a rousing success. Don't tell me, show me, right? Don't tell me, show me. How do I know it was a rousing success? The finished quilt, complete with 22 embedded audio clips, was featured, blah, 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 blah. Is there a character here? So the quilt can be a character, but who else could be a character? The people, the families, whoever it was that organized this, the master tailors or seams people, seamstress, seams people, the people who are listening to the stories, right? Whoever had this idea originally, tell me that story, but don't tell me it was a rousing success, because I don't believe you. But if I hear it from one of those voices, I know it's a rousing success because it worked for me. Okay, Chicago Tribune, big paper, right? This was a story about a man who'd been donating blood and platelets, not just blood, but platelets, for, he had made his 500th donation. All these blood banks, they're trying to get the word out all the time. It's the same story. We need more people to donate more blood, to donate more platelets, to think about it. How do we make that story new every time? So here's a story about a guy who just did his 500th pint, and they celebrated it with a birthday cake. It was a really hokey story, but I read it, and I connected with the guy, and I thought about giving blood afterwards. It worked for me. There was an audience, I was the audience, and they captured me. This guy was like, he can do it, I can do it, right? And there were some silly quotes involved, but it was all people-focused. I've got blood, everybody in the audience has blood. Their audience is pretty big. This was the beginning of an op-ed from the New York Times. So it was written by two people who had been studying the food stamp program in the country, and if there had been less money allotted to it, which we know that's now it's been rejuvenated as a topic of discussion by our administration, what would happen? Do they start with statistics, numbers, the study itself, which is where oftentimes science will default, right? If you're telling us a story with some policy or scientific data or stats, you don't want to start with numbers, you don't want to start with the statistics, you want to start with the people. And this one starts with a quote, which can be sometimes a little bit dangerous, starting an article with a quote, but in this case, it works beautifully. What do you do when you're hungry? We asked Maylee, a 6-year-old girl. I go to bed and I think about eating, she said. You're in. I was in right away. I mean, this is a topic close to my heart, but I just thought, what a brilliant way for a scientist to start a story. It's not about the laboratory, it's not about the stats and the analysis, it's about the kid. It's about the heart of the study. Here's where all the stats come in, all the analysis, the years, 3.1 million households, insecurity, all the language that we associate with policy and the like. But it was tucked down lower, so I already had the thread of the story before I got to this information. Now, this is just supportive for me. I need the stats, I need the information to support the argument that started with Maylee there. But I'm going to keep Maylee in my mind. She's the one I'm connecting to. You can also go with visual stories. So this is a story that was part of a Guatemalan group. My daughter's actually a photographer, and she does a lot of Central American work. And when she sent me that photo, I just wanted to meet this woman. I wanted to understand what those hands had done with their work. I could feel a lot from the outfit that she's wearing. She was an indigenous person, and she was a weaver. And I had a lot of questions. So the story generated with a visual impact, right? You always want to have anecdotes, life, bring it alive, right? I'm always telling my students, bring sensory details to the forefront. If I can't smell it, and I'm talking about food in a restaurant or a food program, then it's not working for me. If I can't taste it, if I can't hear somebody talking to me, talking with me, then it's not working for me. But bring it alive, bring all of the senses alive, okay? Show me, don't tell me. Dialogue, you want to have those quotes. Specifics, it's not a tree, it's an ash tree. It's not just an ash tree, it's a 200-year-old ash tree. It's not just an ash tree that's 200 years old, it's an ash tree that's 200 years old, and it's got a threat coming its way. So what's the town doing about it? Okay? Does anybody remember this story? Orwell, Vermont. This is back in 1991. And Orwell decided, well, let's see how they started. Orwell town manager Noel Smith had a problem one day last spring. How to keep the town's cemetery tidy while keeping within his budget. Okay. And actually we have somebody here who's in charge of the cemetery in one of the towns. So after receiving proposals from several landscaping companies, average tab $3,000, Smith hired his own low bidder. And it turns out it was a farmer, a sheep farmer. And she said, I'll bring my sheep, and you don't have to pay me much, but they'll come in and they'll do the work, and they'll do it well. It captured the nation. Orwell, Vermont, right? So they didn't want to be on the map because of the sheep in their cemetery, but this thing went viral before viral was a term. Go ahead.
So we proposed doing this at our cemeteries in Calais, and it was at a small meeting, and somebody got up and said that there was a lot of cattlemen buried in our cemeteries, and they would roll over in their graves if they got lost in the
I love it. Well, that's very similar to what happened in Orwell. People felt it was disrespectful to have sheep tiptoeing over some of their family members, right? So this was Mother Earth News that covered it. This ran in so many different publications. I watched it just go on fire. It was fascinating to watch. I think Yankee magazine, I think it started in the Addison Independent, then Yankee picked it up, and then Mother Earth News got a hold of it, and they just played with the language. They had such a good time with this story. So there was a lot of argument, and the select board ultimately decided we've got to fire the sheep. Who's mowing now that the plots have thickened and the sheep have been shorn from duty? Great language play, right? People are chuckling over this. Some of the protesters have been told to take charge of clipping, reports Smith. It's a great last line, right? And there's the fired, now they're laid off, right? But this is novelty, right? We were talking about novelty. It was timely, it had just happened. You have some wonderful characters there, the town manager, the farmer, the sheep themselves, and all those characters who are buried under the ground as well, and the people in the town who got upset by it. This was done by Sarah Donegan. She was the director of our library, and she had taken a Vermont StoryLab workshop, and we were talking about using characters. So she was doing a fundraising appeal right around Christmas time, around the holidays. And she decided to talk with Alonzo's mother, who she knew Alonzo had really benefited from going to the library. So I'm just going to read you the beginning. At Alonzo's one-year well-child appointment in Hinesburg, he could only say 7 words. His pediatrician stressed the importance of creating a language-rich environment to foster the development of his vocabulary. We've got a character, Alonzo. We have a struggle. He's having a little bit of a difficult time developing his language abilities. Like many parents and caregivers, Alonzo's mother looked to the local library to help create a strong foundation for early literacy. We've got a resolution here. He's now 2.5. He's attended Miss Kelly's story time. Not the story time. We're using specifics. It's Miss Kelly's story time. So she's another character. I've never met Miss Kelly, but I want to. And his mother reports it's been easy, fun to immerse him. He's now very verbal and sings songs he learned at the library all the time. So I quickly wrote a check to the library after reading this. It worked for me, right? I don't know Alonzo. I know Sarah. That's not the reason I wrote the check. I wrote it because I believe in this library. I've watched it grow, and I just felt so strongly about it. But I didn't know they needed money until the story came into my mailbox. So that's what we do at Vermont StoryLab. And I just wanted to mention that we have our own summit coming up in September 19th. But we also do workshops throughout the year. Some of them are very focused on fundraising, grant writing, building awareness or advocacy, oral storytelling, podcasting, or videography, all different approaches, social media and the like. So if you're interested, please follow up and contact us. But in the meantime, keep your stories alive. Look for characters. They are everywhere. You are all rich storytellers. You just didn't know it maybe before this session. And I wish you luck. You're doing beautiful work. It's important work. And we want the stories. We're just dying for them, the audience out there. Good luck.